Hey there, and welcome back to the productivity series. This time we'll be taking a look at the Pomodoro Method or the Pomodoro Technique. And on the right-hand side, I just decided to have this open so we can take a look at that and I can reference it at certain points because it is important to not just look at productivity systems in isolation, but also how they relate to other systems and when they might be useful and what situations you might choose to go with a different system. So let's get right to it. So how does it work? Basically, the Pomodoro method is a very simple system that is very task-oriented. So it is primarily focused on completing tasks. So the first thing you do is you just pick a task, pick a thing you want to do. What do you want to accomplish? And this can be a simple task, complicated project, that doesn't really matter. Once you have your task, you then set a timer. And you can use your timer on your phone, on the computer, and there are specific applications that are designed to help you with the Pomodoro method, and I'll show those in just a moment if you're interested in using any one of these. So you have your task and you set the timer, and 25 minutes of focused work counts as one Pomodoro. Now, the whole point of this is that you're only supposed to work on that task, whatever it is that you've decided to do, until the timer rings. So not getting distracted, not opening up your email, playing with your phone, doing anything else. The deal that you're making with yourself is that for the duration of the Pomodoro, you're only going to be focused on completing or working on that task. And so for bigger projects, you're not going to complete it, but you're going to be focused on moving that project along, completing whatever the next task related to that project is. So then once the 25 minutes of focused work are up, then you get 5 minutes for a break. Now it is just 5 minutes, but that's generally enough to just kind of let your mind pause and relax for a moment, consolidate the work that you've just been doing. So it's also generally not recommended to immediately switch over to something that's very mentally taxing, as tempting as that might be, to just open up a desktop game and start playing. Generally not a good idea. So something kind of light, the idea is actually to let your brain really just rest for 5 minutes. And then after the break is over, you go back and start the timer again and another set of focused 25 minutes. And again, after that's done, you take another 5-minute break. After 4 rounds of 25 minutes, you give yourself a slightly longer break, and that can be anywhere from 15 to 30 minutes is what's generally recommended. You can, of course, make it a little bit shorter or a little bit longer depending on what type of work you're trying to complete. Maybe it's very mentally taxing, and so you need to take a slightly longer break, or it's very easy, and maybe even 10 minutes would be enough. Now, there are other variations of the Pomodoro system. So like I said, generally it's 25 minutes of focused work and then a 5-minute break, and then that just repeats, and then you get a longer break after 4 of those. However, if you feel that that's not enough time to really focus on what you're trying to do, maybe you're doing some really deep thinking or writing or planning or whatever it is, and 25 minutes just feels like it's interrupting you too often, you can always extend it to something like 50 minutes of focused work or even 90 minutes of really deep work if that feels better to you. And again, you could also adjust the break times. So if you're also going to do 90 minutes of deep work, then probably I would take a longer break. Around the 30-minute mark is probably even better after 4 90-minute sessions. So mechanically, the Pomodoro system is really simple and straightforward. It's just 25 minutes of focused work, followed by a 5-minute break. You do that 4 times, and then you take a slightly longer break, and that's it. So couldn't you just set up a timer for 1 hour, work on that, and then call it a day? I believe the power of Pomodoro really comes from the breaks and the fact that the amount of time that you're working in a focused manner is relatively short and is also very strict. So you're really trying to stick to that whatever time you set. Like I said, it is recommended that 25 minutes is a good amount of time for focused work and not any longer than that. There have obviously been studies around how long can the average person sustain a certain level of focus on a task, and it seems to top at around 40 minutes. Obviously, it depends on what the type of task is, who the person is, how interested they are in the task, and so on. So a lot of different variables to consider, but generally, you don't really go beyond an hour. Now, that doesn't mean you can't actually focus for longer than 25 minutes or 45 minutes. It just means that the quality of that focus is going to dramatically drop after around the 45-minute mark. So while it might feel like it's actually counterproductive and why am I taking a break now after just 25 minutes when I'm starting to get into it, it's actually part of why the system works. It's giving your brain enough breaks to consolidate those chunks of information, and so that when you are focused, you're really at the peak of your focus for that duration of time, instead of trying to work for 4 hours straight, and then your focus immediately crashes after about 45 minutes, and it might peak again throughout the period. You're really trying to optimize that focus, and it also makes it feel less daunting, less intimidating, much easier to work through. So let's talk a little bit more about why it works. Primarily, it really does 3 things for you. It makes starting the task or the activity easier. It makes it easier to continue, and it also makes it much more likely and easier to finish. So with regards to making it easier, first of all, it gives you a clear start and finish line. So you're not worried about the complexity of the project. Maybe this is something that's going to take not just a couple of hours, but a couple of days or a couple of weeks. You're trying to consider that all at the same time can be very daunting. It can make it very difficult to start or even know where to start. And motivation is really important to being productive by breaking it down into a very specific, it's only 25 minutes. It's just the next 25 minutes. It's something that makes it much more manageable, easier to handle. You're not feeling overwhelmed because you start the task and you look at the amount of work you have to do and you're thinking about, when is this ever going to end? When is it going to end? It's going to end in the next 25 minutes. That's when it's going to end. So it's relatively easy to mentally prepare for that. It also helps break up overwhelming tasks into much smaller pieces. Again, this is a very task-oriented method. So it really fits all kinds of activities. But if you're working on something that, like I said, takes a couple of hours or a couple of days, it helps keep you focused on just the next immediate task in front of you. You're not worrying about all the other different pieces that are going to have to fall into place to complete that project. Another way that it makes starting easier is that it reduces the mental friction of just getting started. For me, at least, one of the most difficult things about starting projects, especially those that are a bit more complex or that I'm not really familiar with all the things that I am going to need to do to complete it, is really just, it's a mental thing. I know I can do it, but the fact that I have to do it and thinking about it just makes it a little bit hard to actually get started. Because the moment I start to think about it, I start to think about how long it's going to take and complexities and all the different things I'm going to need to do to complete it. If I can just focus on the next 25 minutes or make that kind of deal with myself of, okay, I'm going to start it and it's only going to be 25 minutes. So it's very painless. And if I get into a groove after the next 5-minute break, then I'll do another Pomodoro of 25 minutes. And if that feels good and I'm making progress, then I do another one. So it's very easy to start that chain, reduce the friction of just actually getting started on that project. And because the Pomodoro method is heavily task-oriented and is a very simple approach compared to some of these other productivity systems, it's easy to just adapt to any type of work that you might be doing. It's not really great at just one type of work, like creative work or writing or engineering or whatever it is. It really can help you with just about any type of activity. So it's kind of content agnostic, whereas some of these other systems are geared much more towards a specific type of activity. Pomodoro and time blocking, which we'll see maybe next, are methods that are very easy to just drop and slot into place whenever you need them. You don't need to do a big setup. You don't need to take a lot of time to prepare for it. I just explained it, right? It's just 25 minutes of work followed by a 5-minute break. Do that 4 times, take a slightly longer break. There's nothing complicated to set up or learn or anything like that. You just need a timer. That's basically it. And you only use it when you feel that you need to use it. If you're working on a particularly difficult or complex project or one that's just on your mind and you can't really seem to get started on, this might be a good methodology to actually start that project. And then when you're done for the next activity, you might not need it because it's easy, so you don't need to use it. Next, I want to talk about how it makes it easier to continue that activity. So again, because we are breaking up our concentration into manageable 25-minute chunks, becomes much easier. We're not burning ourselves out because we try to do 2 hours of work and just sustain that high level of focus, which just completely burns us out. We are setting a hard limit on just 25 minutes. Even if we're in the zone and we really would like to continue, best just stop, take that 5-minute break. And once it's over, then you can pick right up where you left off. So it's built-in burnout prevention. Next is that it helps create momentum across Pomodoros. Like I said, because they are relatively small chunks of time, it's not only easy to complete one, but it's easy to then want to continue into the next one because it felt easy and probably you didn't finish the task you were working on. So you have that incentive to, well, if I just do a little bit more work, I might complete it. And because again, it's a relatively small amount of focused time, you're much more likely to continue working on the project and that time adds up. And so that high level of focus that you are working on that project adds up as well. Now going back to that hard limit of just 25 minutes, there's a reason for that and why it's not a good idea to really try and extend that too much, even if you're really in the flow, is because as exciting as the thing you might be working on could be, it's good to just let your brain take a break because eventually you will get tired and being tired is going to affect your focus, is going to affect your performance. And so it's best to just take that 5-minute break when the timer says it's time to take it. And this last point that I have here about reducing decision fatigue is really related to the mental fatigue. So usually if you're working without a timer, you have to feel when it's the right time to stop working. You have to feel when, okay, I've had enough. Let me take a little bit of a break. So then you have to decide first when you've worked enough, whatever that means, and then how long the break is going to be. And so what's the right amount? 5 minutes? 10 minutes? Half an hour? I don't know. And then the other thing is that if you are taking a break, I don't know about you, but usually when I'm supposed to be taking a break, if it's untimed like that, it's just a free amount of time that I just decide to stop working, I'm not actually able to really relax because I'm in the back of my mind thinking about the project that I have not completed, I'm in the middle of. And so by setting a hard limit, I can really let myself just relax because I know that once the 5 minutes are up, I'm going to get the timer and I'm going to be pulled back into the work. I don't have to think about it. The timer is going to do the job of reminding me to come back to work. I can just completely let go for the next 5 minutes, or if it's the longer break, 15 to 30 minutes. So I really let my mind just decompress, relax, so I'm fresh for the next Pomodoro. And it also just makes it easier to finish. So what do I mean by that? First of all, the countdown serves as a sort of accountability. As opposed to just looking at the clock and seeing what time it is and roughly how much time you've worked on this activity, because there is a set deadline, even though it's a relatively short one, you're much more likely to want to try and do just a little bit more work to see if you can finish the task during this Pomodoro and not need to go into the next one. Second, the record of your Pomodoros serves as a record of progress. So instead of thinking about it in terms of time and minutes, you get one Pomodoro for each sustained period of focus. And so when you're working without any sort of timer or any sort of way to tell how long you've been working, it's easy to both feel that you haven't done enough and maybe you've done too much, but it's hard to tell, especially if you're someone who suffers from time blindness and you have difficulty telling how much time you've spent on an activity. Having some way to keep yourself accountable and also just to see that progress in the amount of Pomodoros is really nice and really motivating, especially for longer projects where it can take a lot of time. And so it feels like you're working and you're not seeing that progress because that's just the nature of a particular project. It just needs a lot of time. At the very least, you can see it's almost like a progress bar is loading as those Pomodoros start to add up. You see that actually you've been focusing on this project for quite a while. And so even though it's not complete right now, you can feel good about the amount of effort that you've put into the project and that it's coming along. And finally, it helps train your time awareness. So again, this is something that I personally struggle with a lot. I have a difficult time telling just how much time has passed, how much time I've put into a specific activity. You're really training yourself to become more aware of how much 25 minutes feels like, how much 5 minutes feels like. And so as you start to do this and apply this to different types of tasks and projects, you'll get a better sense for how long something actually takes. Whereas maybe before your day was just a blur and you just do this one activity and then another activity and then you work on a project and you just know when you clocked out, but you don't have a good sense for how much of your time is being taken up by the different things you do throughout the day. This makes it really easy to go back and check how much time I'm actually spending on these different things. And it also helps you build that awareness for then estimating how long something is going to take you. Before you agree to do another project or work on something, you have a slightly better sense of, okay, this is kind of how long it's going to take me to maybe finish it. So if I were to boil down the Pomodoro system in just a couple of benefits, I think these would be pretty good candidates. Urgency from the timer, avoid distractions. Because it is, again, just 25 minutes, it's easy to focus and to make that promise with yourself. At least that's what I find myself doing. Really, all these systems, and especially Pomodoro and time blocking, are promises to myself because there's really nobody else holding you accountable. It's just you and the systems. And so this is a very simple, low stakes promise I can make to myself that I know I'll be able to keep. And seeing that timer in the corner or in my browser and seeing how it's getting closer to being the 25 minutes does push me to work a little bit harder to see if I can't finish the task within the Pomodoro. It actually does work. That urgency pushes me to just work a little bit harder to try and get it done within this Pomodoro. Next are the breaks, which, as I said before, I think really are part of what make the Pomodoro system so elegant, so simple, and yet so useful. It's forcing you to take those breaks. It's forcing you to constrain the amount of focus to just a very specific amount of time and then forces you to take that break. It's much harder to burn yourself out. You might be working on a project or an activity that you really like, and it's also easy to get lost and just spend hours and hours and neglect other things that you should be doing. So by artificially creating these little time boxes around 25 minutes and 5-minute breaks, it keeps you from burning yourself out accidentally. You might spend 3 or 4 hours on an activity that you really enjoy, then you're done, then you got to work on something you maybe don't really enjoy, And now it's hard because you're burned out because you didn't take any breaks. You just worked for the last 3 or 4 hours without stopping. Another benefit is that it helps you track, like I said, how long these tasks actually take. You might not know. If you never measure it, it's hard to tell. And some things that you feel are very simple and are non-essential, as you start to measure them with the Pomodoro system, you might realize they actually take a lot of time in your day. And so it can also lead you to question whether you should be doing certain activities or in what order you should be doing them throughout the day when you have most energy. But you're not even going to be able to think about those things if you don't have a way to measure how long those tasks actually take. And then I feel like I've been hammering on this throughout the entire video, but it is really very simple. It's just 25 minutes. It's easy to start, no matter how complex, how daunting, how many pieces the project has. It's just 25 minutes. If you can commit to the next 25 minutes, you can get started and then build on that momentum. All right. And finally, I just want to show a couple of apps that you can use if you've never used the Pomodoro system before. Like I said, you can use any timer, the one on your phone, the one in your computer. Those work just fine. But these applications are built with the Pomodoro system in mind. So they already come with the preset of 25 minutes of focused work and then a 5-minute break. So for the web, we have Mighty and Pomodoro. I'm just going to open these up so you can take a look at them. They're really simple, and they also give you notifications in the web browser. They'll ask for your permission. You give them the okay, and then they'll actually ding or play some sort of a sound so you can know when the Pomodoro is up or the next break is supposed to start. So this is Mighty, very simple. You've got just the buttons here of the short break, long break, and automatically starts on the 25 minutes for the focus time. Oh, and it seems they actually also have a version for Windows and Mac, so I thought it was only the web version. And then next we have Pomodoro, which is very similar. I believe you can also sign in with your Gmail account and it'll store your sessions. The other one, you might need to record these by yourself, so you can keep track of how many Pomodoros you've taken during a session. But essentially they're very simple. I believe you also have dark mode. Yeah. So it just lives in the browser and it gives you alerts. So it's a very simple system. You don't need to download anything. You can use either one of these with Windows, Mac, or Linux. And then for Windows, we have this one here, which is yet another Pomodoro app. And I'll add the links to all of these in the description of the video so you can get to them. Basically, it looks a little bit like this, and it keeps track of all of your different Pomodoro sessions. So that's pretty nice if you like to look at the metrics and see how productive you've been or how many Pomodoros you've put into this week. You can check that all out. I don't use the Windows version because I don't use Windows, but I've seen that it does have a lot of different things you can do with it. You can even theme it and modify some of the different parameters, like how long a session is, how long a break is, and things like that. So it's really nice. And then finally for the Mac, this is the one that I actually use, which is Tomato, and you can get it on the Mac App Store. Again, just a very simple application. It just helps you keep track of the focus time and the break time, and it'll give you alerts when each one is up. And that's basically it for the Pomodoro method. I think in terms of the amount of effort to benefit, the Pomodoro system is really high in the benefit and pretty low on the effort. It's literally just a timer, so it's hard to go overboard. You just use it whenever you need to, slot it into whatever project you feel like you might be struggling to start or continue or get that momentum going. It's a really good system. I use it whenever I'm starting a project and I'm feeling a little bit unsure, a little bit uneasy, like this is going to be complicated, this might be hard. I just start my Pomodoro timer, and I know that I'm committing to just the next 25 minutes, and that's usually enough to get me started over that initial friction and get me going. So who is the Pomodoro system for? I would recommend it pretty much for anyone, because I feel that most people tend to have issues with time management to some degree. And because it is such a simple system, it doesn't take a lot of effort to try it out. And if you like it, to continue using. There's not a lot of setup. It's just a timer and keep track of how many of these Pomodoros you've done. So while I'm technically not giving any of these productivity systems any sort of a score, the Pomodoro method would score very highly because it is simple to implement. It's simple to just slot in anywhere you need it. You can drop it at any point if you don't like it, and it's not going to negatively affect you because it's holding up your entire workflow or forms the base of your entire productivity system. And benefits could be substantial if you're someone like myself that struggles with time management. So I hope this video is useful and you learned something about the Pomodoro method and why you might want to implement it yourself. And so I will see you in the next video where we take a look at another productivity system.